I have extremely mixed feelings about.
Ultimately speaking, they have central conflicts within the film that are settled by the end of the film.
The thing for me about fan service, what makes it work for me or not, is does it further the story?
What's up, y'all? DT2 Comic Chat here with a review of Across the SpiderVerse. Across the SpiderVerse. Across the SpiderVerse. Now, I have to start out by saying I have an unusual reaction to this film, and that being I have extremely mixed feelings about it. Normally, when I watch a piece of content, I have very decisive opinions. It doesn't mean I think I'm right about everything. It means I think I'm in touch with how I feel about it, and I can articulate it pretty clearly. But for this film, from the time I saw it, I actually experienced it in the theater, to the time I walked out of the theater, to this very moment, I have extremely mixed feelings. So let's talk about what happens in the film, and I might have some guests pop by to. My first reaction to people saying that this is along the lines of The Dark Knight, and this is along the lines of The Empire Strikes Back. I can see why people say that, because I feel like they almost feel obligated to say it, because The Empire Strikes Back and The Wrath of Khan are the gold standard for the second film in a franchise, and then the gold standard for a gut punch ending, cliffhangers, all that. So I can see why people might say that. But I don't know if I fully agree that it's on that level for this reason. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and The Empire Strikes Back were not nearly as self-aware or as meta as this film. This film is extremely self-aware, and it winks so hard at the audience until you're going to blow out an eyeball from all the winks, and it breaks the fourth wall in a way that is just so meta, because it doesn't literally do it, but so many lines are breaking the fourth wall and speaking directly to the audience. Now, one thing it does do is that the inner story of the movie reflects the conflict around Miles Morales in the real world. I thought that was clever, but I still don't know if that elevates it to the level of a Dark Knight, because I don't know if we have any performances along the level of Heath Ledger, and I certainly don't know if it has the greatest reveals or all that like Empire does. So what do you think about that? What do you think about comparing this film to The Dark Knight, Empire Strikes Back, and Wrath of Khan?
Right. I think it's always fair to compare things, but I agree there's a major difference. All of those films had a major conflict. The conflict, for better or worse, comes to a head. There's a massive battle, and there's some sort of resolution, right? Whether you win or you lose, there's some sort of resolution. This movie came to a head in terms of decision making, right? People making decisions, making choices about what path they're going to take, about where life is going to go, about who their group or their band is. But that conflict doesn't come to that peak. You don't see that conflict sort of peak and dissipate the way that you do with those other films. So I think the major difference is that, yes, there is a dramatic cliffhanger element to all of those films in their own way. But ultimately speaking, they have central conflicts within the film that are settled by the end of the film, whether it's settled in the hero's favor or not.
How do you feel, let's throw in some comments here about race swapping characters, because I am not a fan. I have always felt like you should represent the character as we've known them, and then create new and unique characters if you want some diversity. So what do you think about that?
I'm going to disagree with you. I mean, I grew up with a white Nick Fury, and nowadays I can't imagine anybody other than a black Samuel L. Jackson type Nick Fury.
Mm-hmm.
He inhabited that character and made him live for me. I mean, I grew up and they put him on TV and they made him surfer guy Nick Fury, and that just fell so flat for me. When Hasselhoff played Nick Fury, it was not right. And I have the entire run of Spider-Woman, all 50 issues from when they first came out in a box somewhere. And I love that character, but I don't see anything wrong with Marvel turning around and saying, hey, you know, we need to make the world look a little bit more like it does now. Turning around and saying, yeah, we need to make it look more like the real world does, and have characters that are more diverse characters, more reality impinging. It's not bothering me at all as long as they do it well. And that character was just so awesome. on that bike, just sweeping in. I thought she was fantastic.
I think of this film, Across the Spider-Verse, as a film that's through the lens of Gwen. The movie starts with Gwen. It's her film. It's not Miles's film at all. It's about how she is part of this crowd, and she has gotten sucked into this groupthink, and ultimately speaking, she has to shake off the groupthink and become a leader of a different kind of group, right? That she has to figure out a way to be able to separate herself from these leaders that are leading her in the wrong direction. I think leadership is very much at the center of this film, and I think she's very much the key figure in terms of how leadership functions, who should be in charge, where things should. And this goes all the way back to Miles's mom telling him to go follow Gwen, right? And ultimately speaking, this is about who should be in charge and how you can shake off a bad leader and be able to form your own group, your own leadership, your own path.
I definitely follow what you're saying with that. My problem is, again, if we're not using any type of faith-based frame, if we just use science or we just use the law of averages, it can't be that every time you change an event, the result is bad. The result can be different, I agree. But in the movies, it's always bad. That's the part I disagree with. Now, in this film and Across the Spider-Verse, I think the way they justify it makes more sense because it happens in stages and blips. So like you change one event and that releases a certain amount of energy and things begin to glitch. And the walls between reality begin to melt. And so then the more that snowballs, the more the result you see. Now, I can buy that.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I hadn't thought about that before. And I think it's probably like my mind, as soon as you said that, was going back over all the different what ifs that Marvel Comics has put out in the Elseworlds tales that DC has done. And I think to insinuate the realm that we're used to, the Peter Parkers that we're used to, the Miles Morales that we're used to, their life is already better. Here's what could have been, kind of like the Stephen King novel that took place when he could go back in time and stop the JFK assassination. Did it, and then the world went nuclear and things were horrible after he actually was able to stop the assassination. So I think there's always that version of we're living in our best world, maybe, and that's why the stories tend to deviate that way. But I do like the way you put it, though. Yeah, that's interesting to think about it.
Failure of imagination. You can write alternate history where something bad turns out to be good and the world then continues on in a better way.
Across the Spider-Verse mixes its frames. There are many, many different time travel theories in science fiction, and I obviously cannot alliterate them all, but one of them is the Terminator theory. The Terminator theory is that it's all in the same reality, and reality is elliptical. Anything you change in the past changes the future, but the future can also cause the past, because it's one thing. If Skynet didn't believe that their present would change, why send Terminators back to the past? See, so it's elliptical, it's all one universe. Back to the future reality is that when you change something in the past, you create a new time stream, a new reality that splits off. The net result is the same, but the idea behind it is different. There's also quantum universe theory, which says that every choice that can be made is made. So sitting right next to you now is a version of you that made a different choice. It's just vibrating at a different reality. So there's quantum theory. And then there's 12 monkeys. 12 monkeys is you can't change the past. So anything you do to go back to the past is going to be woven into what already happened. So I like it because time travel and multiverse is such a cheap writing thing if you don't use it well. I like it when it's defined well. And Across the Spider-Verse mixes a bunch of those. They have quote unquote fixed points in time. They have a world full of spider people from every possible permutation of getting bitten by the radioactive spider. But what's the one thing the movie says they all have in common? Tragedy. They say to be a spider person, somebody you love has to die because of you. I understand why they said it. It can't statistically, that cannot possibly be true over every possible reality and choice. That's my only point with that. What do you guys think about that?
What they're saying isn't that you aren't Spider-Man. It's you aren't the hero we know as Spider-Man. Because without the tragedy, you get a guy who runs around and says, how can I make money with these powers? That was always the original Spider-Man was, hey, this is kind of cool. What can I do? It was the, wait a sec, without the tragedy, you don't get with great power comes great responsibility end of it.